So we are back, and I am pleased to be joined by Pastor Meredith Musaeus from Holy Cross Lutheran Church in Menominee Falls, Wisconsin. And nobody will have to spell that today. And I'm with John Futterer, coming live from Kannapolis, I assume, right? And so delighted to have them both. The more seasoned of my panelists. John, if it was you, I would just say the old pastor, but more seasoned pastors. So delighted to have you with us. Two congregations that kind of started working with me just in the last couple of years. And so I'd love for you to just kind of introduce yourselves, a bit of your context, and just any opening remarks that you might have about what it's been like, adding stewardship here in this time in your career, at least in this way. I know you did it before, but in the ways in which we are doing it together. And Meredith, I'd love to start with you because I'm worried John gets a little long-winded, but we can mute him if we need to. So just so everybody is aware of that. So
the irony of you mentioning spelling Menominee Falls is the way that I was taught how to spell it. It's spelled me no money, except at the E is it's a double E at the end, but it's rather ironic. Me no money. Okay. That's how we spell our town. So I'm Meredith, and I've been serving for 15 years at Holy Cross and been a pastor for soon to be 35 years. And I've learned more about stewardship in the last few years that I sure wish I had known earlier. And really embracing it and knowing that it's such an important part of what we do. And so I'm senior pastor, lead pastor. We have a staff of 21. And I have, we brought on a clergy couple team that are just a gift to us. And they came on a year ago. So that's a little bit about our context.
Very good. Thanks, Meredith. John?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mike. I have been here in Kannapolis for almost 5 years now, but it's really my second time here at this congregation. I served this church right out of seminary when I was young, back in 1986. And was here for 3 years as a youth pastor, and then have come back now as senior pastor. Kannapolis is a city of about 48,000 people. We are located about 30 miles northeast of Charlotte, and our congregation has about 450 members, and we have an attendance of about 200 on a normal Sunday. And this has been such a wonderful experience for me. Stewardship for All Seasons has been. And I'll echo what Meredith said. I really wish I had known these things about stewardship and about money and about gifts and talents and abilities and about being confident and comfortable in asking back when I started in the ministry almost 35 years ago. So it's you're never too old to learn.
Oh, it's good to hear. So, John, your context is also a town that might be feeling some scarcity because it was a mill town. The plant shut down and experienced loss. I think your congregation, this was before you, did a major campaign prior to that, leaving some debt when the plant shut down and things changed. So kind of everything lined up poorly, I believe, right?
It was like a perfect storm. It really was. The mill that was here was just huge. And when I mean huge, the physical plant was bigger than the Pentagon. That gives you an idea of how huge this was. It was the largest manufacturing plant in the United States when it was built. And the renovation of our church, which was about a $2 million project, came at the same time as the mill closed and also about the same time that the housing industry fell apart and the stock market fell apart. And so we had about $2 million in debt, and we worked hard. They worked hard to get it down, but things had really stagnated. We owed $800,000. We didn't see any way that we were going to pay that off. In fact, when I came here after about 2 months of being here, we had a retired pastors meeting, and a dear pastor who knew the congregation got me aside, and he said, "I'm going to tell you, you'll never pay this off." He said, "I'm glad you came here, but you're never going to get that debt off of your shoulders. So you might as well just get used to it." And I think I stammered a reply, and I wondered to myself, what have I gotten myself into? It was a bleak time for the congregation. There were times when we wondered, just because we were paying out $13,000 a month in servicing the debt, there were times we really wondered if we were going to be able to keep the lights on, in a given month. So
Yep.
it was a critical time.
Yep. And you led them to abundance. How did you do that?
Well, I listened to your advice.
Well,
in
not
large
not that part. What did you do? Tell them what you did.
Well, the first thing we did was, believe it or not, we really didn't have a stewardship committee.
Yep.
And I think you had spasms when I told you that.
Yeah.
So we were led to form a stewardship committee. We got all ages involved. And we had people on it who we knew were faithful and strong givers and committed to the future of the church. So that was the first thing we did. The second thing we did, and at your suggestion, was we looked at other lending institutions, and we decided on the Mission Investment Fund of our ELCA. That freed up some money every month, which was a good thing. But we still had that about 10 or 11,000 a month going out for a congregation on our of our size. It was just debilitating. We couldn't do ministry because we were trying to survive. And it had been so hard on the congregation because this church has a history of being very supportive of the Synod and the national church, being having a strong youth program, strong community involvement. We continued to do what we could, but we knew there were so many other things that we wanted to do. And that really was a key, was beginning to think about our campaign as opening up monies for us to do additional ministries, for us to renew ministries that had stopped, to begin new ministries. And that really, I think, was a key.
And if I remember something, you all were going to set a goal of a certain amount.
Yeah, we decided that, we had these 2 long appeals, and the stewardship committee said, "Gosh, we just can't do another appeal like that. Let's do one for 6 weeks." And so I said, "Well, what kind of a goal are we going to have?" And they said, "Well, 6 weeks we could do $25,000, and that's going to be maybe more symbolic, but it will be a positive symbolic step." And so I remember I called you and said, we're going to do $25,000 as a goal. And I remember in that non-confrontive way that you have, you said, "My gosh, I don't think I'd waste my time for $25,000." And he said, you ought to aim higher, maybe 100,000. And I said, "There's just no way." And you said, "I tell you what, go in this stewardship meeting and have little slips of paper, and those 8 people, have them write down what they would pledge to this appeal in 6 weeks." And he said, "You call me back." So our goal at that point was $25,000. I took up the pieces of paper, and the 8 people in there had made pledges representing $35,000. So I sheepishly called Mike and told him that, and his answer was, "Gosh, I just love it when I'm right." And so we set the goal at $100,000, and we far exceeded that figure.
Yep, good. I'm going to come back to a couple things, John, but Meredith,
Yeah.
can y'all hear me okay? Am I breaking up at all?
No.
No.
Okay, excellent. So you mentioned a staff of 21, but you had, like, you're not just flushing money, right?
Nope. In fact, the first year that we were that we had joined in working with Stewardship for All Seasons, we really struggled financially that year. And if we hadn't been, we had paid off a parking lot, done a big parking lot campaign. We brought on new staff people. But if I hadn't had GSB kind of backing as a cheerleader and working with this amazing group of lay people, we could have really gone into a very negative framework and a real scarcity model. So we just kept moving forward, and we set new visions for 2020, which we have kept up through this time. And some of the things we couldn't do because of the pandemic, but we've shifted. We were going to rent a van every weekend to bring senior citizens to church because transportation is an issue in our community. But instead, we've been doing it using those funds for other things to build our senior citizen ministries. And it's been important to challenge people. But telling the outcome stories has made such a huge difference. And then asking for matching gifts. You may want to go into that more, but that's made a huge difference.
Well, I do want to go into that, Meredith. Why don't you've done matching gifts really, really well there. And why don't you talk a little bit about the way in which that's kind of come together and kind of maybe even a little your fascination with it?
Well, I was a little skeptical about it in the beginning. It had never dawned on me to do that. And the first person I asked, I said, well, I'm trying to raise $20,000 towards matching gifts for next year. And I said, do you think you could give 5,000? And he said, well, yes, I can, you know. And actually what they sent us was $20,000. And in the meantime, I was asking other people. And so that is now in our dedicated account for other types of matching gifts. But I continue to ask people. One of the people I asked to match that year came back this year and said, you know, I'd like to give 5,000 for this event. So it kind of created an opportunity where they could see a need and respond accordingly. And I never thought of tracking. We track things differently now than we used to. So this past year, you know, this year of COVID, we had 130 people increase their pledges. We had 152 remain the same. But what really was great for us was these matching gifts. We got 39 new pledges this year. And we received 14 new electronic giving. So our pledge was, you know, for every person who signs up for electronic giving, it will be matched by $100, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And that electronic giving is really what has sustained us this year in such a huge way.
And you really find these matching gifts stimulating pockets of generosity that weren't really being stimulated before.
Absolutely. And I think the people appreciated being asked to do that because they saw it as a way that they could stimulate other people's generosity. And as you have mentioned, you don't want to be the only person being generous. So it's been very effective, very effective.
Yeah, and that something I've really not developed with the group today is the idea that some of your people are giving a lot and they have more to give, but they won't do it until they see other people growing. And those, by inviting them to that matching or challenge gift, they're getting to be more generous, and they're helping others to become more generous, which just really is a win.
One other thing I should mention too: the first year we had a certain matching gift for people who gave under $10, $10 a week. I think it was under $10 a week. And we had a match if they could raise it. We did one match for $1 a day, and we did another match if they could double their giving. those kinds of incentives help move some of our people from those lower areas of giving up a step, and was effective too.
You've done well. Can you hear me at all?
I
Yes.
can hear you.
Oh, fantastic. I'm going to talk then. Thanks, Meredith. John, do you have a debt now?
We paid all of it off. We were able to use some existing funds to pay the last bit of it off, and we are paying ourselves back religiously. We're really working hard to pay ourselves back, and we hope to be.
He froze. Oh, he froze. Oh. Hey, John, you froze. Stop your video and restart it, see if that helps. And in the meantime, I'm going to jump back to Meredith.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Wait,
He's
John,
back.
say something, John.
Am I back?
Yep.
You are. Finish that last statement.
Okay. Just was going to say that we had enough existing funds that we paid the last little bit off, and we should be completely finished paying ourselves back by the end of next year.
That's so fantastic. I think it's fair to say that the congregation, and I don't blame them at all for having this feeling. Like, I mean, the mill shut down, which was their world. They had this $2 million debt. I mean, as you've described it, the perfect storm. Felt like they were in the midst of the most scarcity that you could feel like they had every reason to believe in scarcity. How has their feelings changed?
It's just been a dramatic change for us. The town has had to reinvent itself. That's creating a lot of energy. We've built a minor league baseball stadium downtown. We have an apartment unit that will have 240 units right across the street from the church, 150 townhomes being built now behind the church. I'm not sure we would be ready for that if we hadn't gotten ourselves to this point financially. We are so excited now about the future, and it's carried over into so many other different ways. Can you all hear me? Yeah, it's carried over into so many different ways. Our membership has grown. Our youth programming is back to where it was sort of in the glory days. Mm-hmm. We don't have people talking about the glory days of the past anymore. We have people looking to the future and what we yet might be. Just as a quick example, when the pandemic started and there was a run on our local food bank, the food bank sent a message out to all the churches. Our congregation gave 3,000 pounds of food in like 4 or 5 days, just an amazing outpouring. And I think part of that was almost a feeling of that we have been blessed so much in these last 3 or 4 years, we can be a blessing to others. And it's a congregation that has always enjoyed that, always enjoyed being an outreach sort of a church, a helping church. For us to be able to pay our apportionment and to raise it 10%, and then the next year to raise it 15%. I know apportionment's the old-fashioned word for it, but when we lost that ability, it was like a cut to the very soul of the congregation. They prided themselves on always being a church that pulled their weight and did more. And when they couldn't do that, it was just a real damage to the psyche of the congregation. And to be able to do that again was so wonderful. And I'll tell you, having been in the ministry for 35 years like Meredith has, people talk around the church and they either talk positive things or negative things. Mm-hmm. And it's like a tide. When the talk is positive, when you see what the congregation is doing, and you hear stories about, well, you know, we helped here and we made a difference here, and this is what we're doing. It's like the momentum just starts, and you can feel that mood shift, and you know, you begin to go into projects anticipating that they're going to go well, and that's such a good feeling.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's so great. John, actually, the best part of that entire thing that you just shared was the smile on your face when I talked about how the culture had changed. I'm going to go back and grab a screenshot of that later, because that's what it's about. Because I mean, holy cow, ministry can be exhausting and can wear you down. And when you live in that scarcity, everything's just harder. But when
Yes.
you do the work to make the turn, then the joy comes back, I think. And you know, I think it's also a myth to think that, you know, the abundance feeling was always there. But when you make the conversion from scarcity and start living into abundance, I do believe the joy comes back to the ministry, and it was evident on your face, which was just really fun to see. So exciting to hear. Meredith, you happen to have as one of your congregational members the DEM for your synod. So
Yep.
he always shares stuff with me, and I know you're getting good at sharing outcome stories. Any thoughts on that? Any results that you've seen that have tied directly to those outcome stories? And I'm thinking of one in which the DEM was involved in making an extra gift because you told one. And if you forgot the story, I can remind you. But
Was that about giving the food pantry? We had ordered some hand sanitizer, and we ordered 3 of them, and then we closed our building, but our food pantry was open down the street. And so we gifted them with just a hand sanitizer and put it on Facebook, and people were thrilled about how we had shared that rather than keeping it to ourselves. So that was one. The other was the parking lot. I was so annoyed by this parking lot campaign because we have 2 of them and it costs so much money. But it turned out that our parking lot turned out to be our new sanctuary all summer and all fall. And we referenced that this parking lot was our sanctuary. And thank you for all the gifts, because we could gather safely without big potholes in it. So that was another one. But
you actually made a parking lot campaign enjoyable for me because it had that connection. Because I'm with you, I hate raising money for parking lots because it seems like so much money, but it became your sanctuary.
It did become our sanctuary. The other thing if I could just add, is don't be shy about, sometimes I've been timid about, if we talk about this social justice issue, people are going to leave or people are going to whatever. I think it's more important than ever for us to be church and point to the gospel and to Jesus of the scriptures and his radical nature, because we may lose a few people, but we're also going to gain people who are very hungry for that word. And so oftentimes being stewardship and telling the story is stepping boldly into talking about reasons why people are poor, and and inclusivity and those kinds of things.
Yeah, good. John, I invited you to be part of this, and I know you thought about things ahead of time. What else do you want to share with the group? And remember, we can mute you if you go too long, but, you know.
Well, I think one of the things that, you know, is so important to remember is that people don't give toward a budget. And they really give toward ministry. And I think generationally, younger folks, if you can capture their interest, their attention, their hearts with a ministry, they really respond well to that. One of the things that we did here, and Mike has been so involved in Lutheran camping ministry, we partnered with a local elementary school that had a lot of low-income students and really was struggling. It was a new school based on the arts, and we came up with the idea of sponsoring kids to go to camp, and our church would pay everything for that. Well, these kids had just never had that opportunity to go away, and it has been such a wonderful experience, not only for the kids but also for our congregation. We have things to raise funds. We talk about it. We see pictures of it. We see videos of it. And it's just been one of the best things that we've ever done. And I was talking to the principal after one of the summers, and she said, this has been, for these kids, this has been the best week of their year. And she said, you never know what life change that week might have produced for some of these kids. So that's been such a great thing. And you never know what might be the thing that's going to get an individual's attention. The last thing that I think we learned was not to be afraid to ask. When we started this campaign, we were approaching people in the congregation and all of that. And I remember, Mike, that you mentioned, don't forget about the friends of the congregation. And I said, I'm not sure what you mean. And you said, well, I'm talking about former pastors. I'm talking about members who were active and moved away, people who live in the community and may not be a member of your church, but they know the church. And he said, send a letter out, make a personal note on the letter, make a phone call. We had one gift from that of $100,000. And it came in the mail the last day of the campaign. Well, we had a great campaign already. And then, to get the mail and to open that letter, it was just unbelievable. And the person who gave, his uncle had been a Lutheran pastor and he'd been raised in another denomination, was the organist here at Kimball back in the 40s, early 40s, was so impressed by the congregation that he became a Lutheran and then went to seminary. He had a very successful ministry in North and South Carolina, but his nephew, this pastor had been like a father to this young man. And when he heard that we were doing the campaign and I mentioned on the letter, remember, this is where your uncle started and all that, he said, I'm honored to make this gift in honor of my Uncle Frank. And of course, then we were able to go to the retirement home where Frank is living and tell him about the gift. And it was just a blessing to everyone. But if we hadn't have taken 5 minutes and written the letter and put a personal note, that gift wouldn't have come. Not every gift is $100,000, but it was a nice surprise and a wonderful gift.
I remember you called me on vacation about that one. It made my day too. So well done. Thank you, John. Meredith, what else would you share with the group?
It is all about telling the story and using pictures. This year for our annual meeting, being that's all going to, which is Sunday, we're going to have a video that is 10 of our kids, our youth, telling the story of how they've grown in faith. Before we get into the numbers, before we get into anything, so we're going to share that outcome of just, and it gives me, it's just so wonderful to see that. And so I think that's really important. And then I also talk about as a pastor learning to ask for money. I think it was at one of the SAS things where you talked about how the head football coach of any state college, that's part of his job is to ask for money. And I suddenly realized how much money my people are giving to the University of Wisconsin. So Barry Alvarez writes them a personal letter, some of them, the athletic director, and we need to do that too, because they have a story about football teams, but we have a story that is so much more important, and to try to connect people to that. So that inspired me. And I also tell them that they make a commitment to the Packers by having season tickets. So I said, if, in terms of pledging, you pledge all the time.
Yeah.
You make a commitment, you pledge here, you pledge here, you pledge there. Think about your church.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, 30 minutes goes by way too fast. I'm sure there's many in the conference that wish we would have just done this the whole time and they didn't have to listen to me. You all have been great. I really appreciate all you're doing. And it's fun for me to sit here and just listen to ways in which God is active and involved in your ministries and expanding the kingdom through your work. Privilege for me to be part of it. And thanks for sharing with the group. I know you've been a blessing to them. So again,
thanks for asking.
Good to be with you, and take care.
Bye-bye.
And Mike's book is #1 for Fortress.